All right, everybody. How you doing? It's News Debate. I am Lee. Great to have you here live over on Stereo Live on rumble.com/users/NEWZ Debate, twitch.tv/NEWZ Debate, and over on Twitter Spaces where we have patreon.com/NEWZ Debate supporter and friend of the show, Shannon, joining us here. I don't think I'll be able to do another show before Thanksgiving. Thus, today's show, our Thanksgiving show. Would love to have a nice debate on what Thanksgiving means. Should we celebrate Thanksgiving? Should we celebrate something else? Probably geared towards Native peoples. Should we just celebrate the fact that this is a time where millions upon millions of Americans don't have to work? Just celebrate a break from work, all that great stuff. Shannon, over on Twitter Spaces, you've already tweeted up a storm. How are you doing?
How are you today, Lee?
Good. I'm even better now that you're here. You dropped a bombshell on the last show. You 3 years ago were diagnosed as being autistic. You finally got that certificate. And we talked a lot about that. Maybe we can go a little further today. But tell me about this story from PBS that you have tweeted.
Oh, the Comey and Lita James lawsuits got thrown out because the district attorney, or what is it? Is it district attorney that Trump appointed is not in there correctly, according to the judges, because she has not been confirmed, and she's over her 100 and something day trial period. So she couldn't file those lawsuits legally.
Let's hear it for being a stickler for the rules, right? So this is interesting because we'll read from PBS here in a moment. But I believe this doesn't necessarily mean what was attempted to happen by the Trump administration is incorrect, just this technicality. So I'm sharing this over on my Twitch and Rumble streams, all of that available at bit.ly/NEWZ debates, where all my links live. A federal judge today dismissed the criminal cases against former FBI director. Oh, yeah, so criminal, not lawsuits, but criminal cases against former FBI director, super tall guy, James Comey, and New York Attorney General Letitia James, concluding that the prosecutor who brought the charges at President Trump's urging was illegally appointed by the Justice Department. The rulings halt, at least for now, this is what I was talking about, at least for now, a pair of prosecutions that had targeted two of the president's most high-profile political opponents, and thus amounts to a stunning rebuke of the Trump administration's legal maneuvering to install an inexperienced and loyalist prosecutor willing to file the cases. So this is what also I was referring to. The order does not concern the substance of the allegations against Comey or James, so my guess is this could happen again, but instead deal with the unconventional manner in which the prosecutor, Lindsay Halligan, was named to her position as interim U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. Defense lawyers say the Trump administration had no legal authority to make the appointment, and in a pair of rulings, the courts agreed and say the invalid appointment required the dismissal of the cases. The Justice Department has not immediately disclosed its next steps, though it could appeal the ruling and could also look to refile the cases a different way. What else here is useful? In a separate statement, the New York State Attorney General, Democrat, has pled not guilty to mortgage fraud allegations. So that's another separate thing. At issue in this ruling is the mechanism the Trump administration employed to appoint Halligan, a former White House aide with no prior prosecutorial experience, to lead one of the Justice Department's most elite and important offices. Halligan was named as a replacement for someone who resigned in September amid Trump administration pressure. He stepped aside after Trump told reporters he wanted the man out. Attorney General Pam Bondi swore in Halligan soon after. Comey was indicted 3 days after Halligan was sworn in, and James was charged 2 weeks after that. Oh, okay, this is interesting. The Justice Department has defended Halligan's appointment and revealed last month that it also gave Halligan a separate position of, quote, special attorney. All right. Presumably as a way to protect the indictment from collapse. Hey, this is not who you think it is. She's a special attorney. But the courts ruled such a retroactive appointment could not save the cases. Sorry. Though both defendants had asked for the cases to be dismissed with prejudice, meaning the Justice Department would be barred from bringing those charges again, the court instead dismissed them without prejudice. So, not a ruling specifically on the charges, just on the procedure that they took to get those charges in place. Interestingly, though, Comey was indicted just days before the statute of limitations in his case expired, which could complicate any effort to refile the case. Yeah, that's difficult. I would say if you filed the case and there was some sort of procedural mishap, which I think explains what just happened, refiling the case is just an expansion of what was already done. So I would say it doesn't matter that the statute of limitations has now expired. However, I am no lawyer. Interestingly, here again, judges have separately held that several other interim U.S. attorneys in New Jersey, Los Angeles, and Nevada have served in their positions unlawfully. So the same as was just pointed out here, but those cases have been permitted to proceed. So, all right, it's not a straight rule. I guess it depends from time to time, but all right, that's everything here. So, Shannon, you brought this to my attention. Appreciate that. What do you think about this? So, the charges, in theory, could be brought again. With Comey, the statute of limitations has expired, so I think there would have to be some legal wrangling there. But I think the spirit of the statute of limitations is that if nothing is done, then okay, you're off scot-free for whatever you may have done. However, if charges are filed and there's a procedural mishap, I would say that, starts the race. If you start a marathon and you trip, they're not like, all right, get the hell out of here. What you tripped here in the first few steps? You get back up, you're behind, but you're still going. I think that is what should be used here. I'm not pointing to evidence for Comey. I'm not saying he's guilty. I'm not saying he's innocent. But if you file charges and there's a procedural mishap, let's look at the spirit of the statute of limitations rather than the very letter of the law. I think that's fair. What do you think about this?
No, I think he's this. Once the statute of limitations up, that's why they got to make sure they do everything correctly, especially when you're that close to a deadline of filing. It was like 4 or 5 days, and when they first filed it for the statute of limitations to be up. And not only that, I mean the Cabal bomber. They also brought charges against him, and he's using the same thing that Comey did to get his case taken away too. But obviously, he'll have a longer statute of limitations. That
Can
was
you
in the
remind me what you're
NBC News
referring to
article.
when you say cabal bomber? I'm not sure what that reference is.
Oh, here I'll give you the. I'll give you the. I'll give you a screenshot in the article. This is because this is just NBC compared to PBS. I had read a couple of them. I just couldn't remember which one was in where.
I thought I was up to date with all my shootings and bombings. I have no idea what this is referencing. There's just too many now.
There you go.
So,
It's
okay, here
totally.
we are. Another high profile defendant being prosecuted by Halligan's office. Kabul airport bombing suspect. Is that the US? Why are we prosecuting that?
I don't know if he got.
KABUL? Is that some city in Minnesota? That doesn't seem like that's anywhere around here.
I don't think it's Minnesota. No, I don't know if they caught him and extradited him here, or I didn't really know what.
Kabul, Louisiana. That wonderful city.
Oh, it was the cabal when we were getting out of Afghanistan that killed the 13 service members.
Yes. I feel like that should be more of a military thing. I feel like I don't know the details of this, but Afghanistan, part of the war on terror, but still, like, that was a war. And it's not like if we captured an enemy fighter, they should be brought to the US and tried in some district court. So I don't know about the details of that.
He was charged in federal
This
court in Virginia for providing material support to a foreign terrorist organization, resulting in death. So he wasn't actually the bomber.
Is he a US citizen? This is a whole can of worms. I feel like we'll just have to keep going down. But whatever the case, because of
Yeah, he must have been extradited here because they caught him near the Balochistan province near the border of Afghanistan.
Oh, that's not Louisiana? Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought that was just like Alabama, Louisiana. No. Yeah, this is so out of my wheelhouse. I don't know anything about this. I'm just going to go ahead and plead ignorance here. But the point you bring up is because of this whole Halligan thing. This also is being brought up because of the ruling and these appointments. But as we read from PBS just now, some appointments which were found to be illegal or were too long, whatever the case might be, those cases have actually been allowed to proceed. This one seems like it was so egregious. There was a ruling that says we're just going to drop these cases. However, these cases can be brought again because there was no ruling on the cases themselves, just the procedure. Let's jump over here really quickly to stereo. Auntie McItballs. Happy holidays, Auntie. Left us some voice message. Let's hear from Auntie McItballs over on stereo.
How y'all doing today? Should we celebrate Thanksgiving? Of course, it's been a tradition since 1863. Why would we change it? I mean, I see no reason to change it. Again, it's been a tradition for, a century and a half or more, 180 years, whatever it is. I can't count that high without taking my shoes off. But yeah, I'm all for it. It's a great time that this holiday season. It's great, to celebrate family and friends and give Thanksgiving for what we've got and for being here, I guess. Mm.
That last sound was great. Oh, yeah. I love the messages from Auntie McItballs. Send us some more. Let's check in really quick with fake President Trump. Fake President Trump, hope you're having a wonderful Thanksgiving week. Should we celebrate Thanksgiving?
Yes, Americans should celebrate Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a time to reflect on the blessings in our lives and to give thanks for the things we have. It is also a time to spend time with family and friends and to enjoy the food and festivities that come with the holiday. I believe that it is important for Americans to take time to appreciate the things they have and to be grateful for all the good in their lives.
So poetic, our fake President Trump. All right, so Auntie, send me some more messages. Shannon, what do you think about this? We have this debate every year around this time. Makes sense. There's a growing movement up until probably when someone got in the White House the first time and then now the second time, non consecutively serving 2 terms. When there was a growing, I think, is that, I'll have to look this up. No, that's Columbus. Okay, so it's part sort of with Columbus Day as well. There's the competing holidays of Columbus Day, Indigenous Peoples Day, Persons Day, whatever the term might be. And Thanksgiving, well, it's this week on Thursday. I believe I've read in the past that some Native American tribes, governments, whatever the correct association is, hold like a national day of mourning, that kind of a thing. Shannon, what do you think about this?
I like Thanksgiving. I like the whole turkey and stuffing and mashed potatoes, even though it has nothing to do with really the Thanksgiving. But since they didn't have that stuff, but I understand why Native Americans would be pissed about it because it was really like the Wampogs helping the Plymouth Rock people on the Mayflower gang up into that started into the Pequot War, which is in my area of 1638, 1637, 1638. We have a statue in my town of the guy that did the Mystic Massacre and burned a whole village alive of women and children. So, yeah, I can see why.
Really, that
Native Americans
statue
are.
hasn't been taken down? That statue has lasted this long?
That statue, I've been trying to get rid of that statue since I was in high school. And I'm 50. It's covered in red paint about this time every year. John Madison.
And I'm guessing the no, let's not get rid of the statue argument is that this person did some other things. This is our national history. Do you know what that argument is?
Yeah, he was the preacher here at the First Church. Uh, Windsor's the oldest town in Connecticut, which is where I live, and he was a preacher at the First Church, but then, burned all the women and children alive while the men were out hunting. So, in the Mystic Seaport, he put them all in the Mystic Seaport uh, barracks type thing and then burned it all. But, they hung a witch too around that time too, so I'm not too happy with my government. But,
So you're telling me this guy has some range, man of God, killed a bunch of innocent people, maybe also including a woman who was accused of being a witch. All right.
he was
You
pardoned.
know,
He was
if I lived
pardoned in like
back in the
2019.
1600s,
Nothing like waiting 400 years for a pardon
the woman who was
after they hang
burned
you.
received an official pardon.
She was hanged, not burned, but yeah, she received an official pardon like 2019. She wasn't a witch. She was just an older lady who was a healer, who was a midwife. That was before the
Better
whole
late
Salem witch
than
trials and all that.
never. Yeah, it's. Oh wow! So this is a precursor. Oh, this is an early thing.
Yeah, this was before the Salem witch
Yeah,
trials.
it's nice when they like. I think the Catholic Church pardoned, who was it, Copernicus or whoever, who was the
Yep.
scientist, and they were like, no, we don't like that. So whenever the Catholic Church releases one of these very late pardons or something for a woman who was burned or some sort of government statement for a massacre of native people, whatever it may be, I think it's nice. But yes, it is a bit hollow because, well, these people suffered the consequences, and oftentimes very terrible consequences that we can only imagine what that must feel like. And especially, I don't want to diminish the pain of being put to death, but I think the lead up to that, knowing that you're going to be put to death, is also something that needs to be recognized. Okay, so
Yeah.
that's some interesting unpleasantness, an anecdote from your neck of the woods. So, of course,
Well, it's sort of
everyone
like
can
Plymouth Rock.
decide how
Plymouth
they
Rock,
want. I'm sorry, go on.
like Plymouth Rock is not Plymouth Rock. I mean, it was named Plymouth Rock 118 years after they landed. So they first anchored their ships off of Provincetown, Cape Cod, and then went inland later. But you know, it wasn't like they just came along and got Plymouth. No, they were in Cape Cod first. And all it is a
I got to say,
rock with a
Shannon, on my other recent show a few days ago, you mentioned how you had been diagnosed with autism 3 years ago, and one of the signs of that was an interest in very specific things. And I gotta say, the fact that you're pulling all of this information out of your pocket and you're like, I'm sorry, it was either 1677, 1678. I apologize, I don't have the correct date, as if I was going to call you out on that. This is a real demonstration, I feel like, of a little bit of that autism.
little bit. I got a little, tied up there trying to get rid of that statue and going back in history of what the guy actually did.
Yeah, without knowing more about this specific individual, this seems like a win-win. Getting rid of this statue. To play devil's advocate for a hot second, um, if something's been there a really long time, um, I just like getting rid of a lot of our norms with President Trump. I do see a valid argument from time to time without giving any specific example of that. Okay, this has been here a
I
really
no,
long
I
time.
mean it was unveiled in 1889 in Mystic and then moved here because Mystic didn't want it anymore. Mystic said, "No, we don't want the murderer here. Send him to where he was born, Windsor. We'll put his statue up there."
But then all
It
the
was
people in
brought here.
Windsor were like, Bring the statue. Bring the statue. That's a bold move on your town's part.
Yeah, they brought it here and we were like, we don't want it either. Get rid of it. We want it. Well, it's like on the historical society is like across the road from it, and we just want it moved into the historical society. We don't want it on the green area. Take it and put it in the historical museum. We don't want it as a proud display next to our World War II veteran, memorial statue and our fountain and stuff like that. But they said they were going to remove
I
it.
think that's
It
a
hasn't
good
been removed.
compromise with with Confederate statues or excuse me, a statue like this dealing with very old pre-American history with someone who apparently did some very terrible things. Hey, was also a man of God. Boy, that's a nice diss at religion right there. Um, it rather than removing it and just like it's gone, moving it to a place where it can exist as a historical reference and be somewhat hidden. So if you want to go see it, you got to like really put that in your daily plan. Go inside and go look at this, as opposed to it being in a public place. I think if more of this cancellation of terrible yet still American history that some people find pride in, if those sort of compromises can be reached, I'm much more okay slash on board with getting rid of these statues, these monuments, whatever it might be, from public places and giving the opportunity for, if it's a private organization or just somewhere else, for that statue to still be there. Because, once again, without looking at any specific example, American history for so long was blatantly anti Native American, anti Black, anti insert a bazillion groups here, anti woman. But it was still the history that we have. And if you start going through and saying, well, we can't do this, we can't do that, what can we do for several hundred years of pre and post founding of the United States American history? Abraham Lincoln, before the Emancipation Proclamation, was not as anti-slavery as he was. In fact, the Emancipation Proclamation only freed slaves that were held by the Confederacy at that time. Parts of the Confederacy that were occupied at that time by Union forces were not included in the Emancipation Proclamation. So when you start looking at some of these facts, I think, well, you could cancel Lincoln and you could cancel this person and that person. And then it's like, well, who can you point to aside from really brave people, both white and non-white in American history, who really, use their lives as collateral to say this is wrong? And those people can be celebrated too, but then like what else do you have, right? I mean, and this goes across most nations. The further back you go, the easier it is to cancel for really bad things. I'm not saying, oh yeah, back in the day someone did something that's not quite all right. I mean, things that are clearly not all right. So I don't know, little devil's advocacy there. Find places for really specific bad offenders so they don't have to just go away, because I think that has a lot of negative consequences associated with it. Um, if maybe Trump wouldn't be president today if we had handled these issues a little bit better. 8 years of Barack Obama led to Donald Trump. I feel like some things could be handled better to avoid this back and forth. And as a Democrat, I'd like to see more Democrats in the White House. Don't know if they have the ability to pull that off anymore. But this goes into just my general advice for liberal people, for my fellow Democrats. focus on things that really matter. Don't give up on things that really matter. But does a statue matter as much as subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare marketplace? Do statues matter as much as social services for Americans? Do trans issues matter as much as this, that, or the other? Maybe to you they do, but if you poll Americans, a lot of things are more important than a lot of the things that Democrats have fought for as of late, and I think given themselves a bad name. Make balls over on stereo. Give us some more voice messages. So going back to Thanksgiving. So Shannon, in your mind, is celebrating Thanksgiving a personal choice? Are people right to be offended if someone is super pro Thanksgiving?
I mean, it is a holiday tradition, but we really don't learn about why we're celebrating it. I mean, it did bring 50 years of peace between the Wampanoags and the Plymouth Rock people, the Mayflower people. But it did lead to the Pequot War and English being involved and more slave trades of Native Americans. But I'm not a Native American, so I can't say if it would offend me if I was. But it's just like
Come on,
Columbus
Shannon.
Day or any.
Don't
But it's
play
just like
that
Columbus
game.
Day or any other. I mean, I don't get offended by Christmas, even though I'm pagan and I celebrate, a few days before. If people want to celebrate Christmas, that's fine. If they want to celebrate Hanukkah, that's fine. I think retail workers should have it off. That's my that's about the extent that I go to, is that it's retail workers should have that day
See
off, and
that
people
I
should.
I would actually disagree with that. I like when stores are open on Thanksgiving. I like when stores are open on Christmas. If market pressure forces stores to make we probably want to be open, but we want to look like we care about our workers' decision. Okay, that's fine because those are market forces. But I have no problem with things. I mean, the United States is an outlier in many reasons, many ways, I should say. One of them is the fact that, especially before the pandemic, it's changed a bit, but we used to have 24/7 everything, especially in
God, I
major
miss it.
cities.
I miss the 24/7 grocery stores. Those were not. I would go at like 2 in the morning when no one was there except stock people. I miss that. But holidays,
But
they
think
should,
about those
get
people's families, Shannon. 2 a.m. stock guy, 2 a.m. stock woman. What about their families?
hey, they're working at night so they can get their kids up for breakfast in the morning and off to school. Now that they don't have those jobs anymore, people with kids are finding it harder, especially if you work opposite shifts
So,
so
if
that you
you and
would
I
have
agree,
childcare.
yeah, opposite shifts, you'll never see your partner. Yeah. So let's bring back. You said something to the effect of, "Well, people shouldn't be working on these holidays," but now you and I have bonded over our love of 2 a.m. grocery shopping. People make a lot of different choices. My guess is if you're working on Thanksgiving, you could have made some better choices. Even people who come from nothing, you probably, if I can generalize for a moment, could have made some better choices if that was a priority for you not to work on Christmas or not to work on Thanksgiving. And conversely, maybe you're so successful that you have to work those days because you're running the ship. It's going to fall apart without you, and you could have made some different choices as well. um I like things being being open on Christmas and Thanksgiving, and I don't have any interest in boycotting companies that are open on those days, because every once in a while, I gotta run and get something. And I've traveled different places in the world, and some places not only are closed on a specific holiday, but they get some time before and after too. And that's a different lifestyle. That's not really American. That's not how we shop, how we think as a whole.
That's true, but having worked those jobs on the holidays, even though you say it doesn't affect you, it really does. Especially with bitchy people on the holidays. Actually, I don't think I've ever, before I was disabled, I don't think I ever got a holiday off. Or at least not a major holiday. Because all my jobs had to work, whether I was a dispatcher or, you know, well, no, I guess when I was a dog trainer, I didn't have to work. So, but when I worked on the equestrian barn, I did. When I worked retail jobs, I did when I was younger, real young.
And I'm sure that was less than ideal, but did when you were in a position where you had to work holidays regularly, whatever time of your life that was, did that make you think, I don't want to do this and therefore I need to get a different job? Or did you think no one should do this, so we should change legislation?
No one should do this, so we should change legislation. It was never about me because I didn't have kids or anything, so I would let people with kids take the holidays. And my holidays don't usually line up with other people's holidays. So, the
You
federal
mean as
holidays,
a pagan?
as a
This is not
pagan,
something
yeah.
that's recognized.
Right.
Excuse me,
So,
Bill, my manager. Yeah, I'm a pagan. People like me used to be burned, but hey, it's okay. They 400 years after the fact, had some pardons, so we're all good. I got this like equinox coming up. I know it's not a federal holiday, but if I could like be out in the woods, you know, I don't know, doing my thing, that would be great. Did you ever try to have that conversation? Was it just like, clearly this isn't going to work? How did you navigate that?
I just put in my PTO whenever I wanted it. I didn't go into the reason of why I wanted my PTO. I just wanted my PTO. I wouldn't tell them it was because, the winter solstice is on the 20th or 21st and not the 25th. And most of our stuff is done at midnight the day of, so to celebrate. The only, I mean, Penzic War was probably the ones that I really wanted to get away from. That's where we did medieval reenactment, but I wouldn't explain that either because most of them wouldn't have understood. Why is it normal to
Yeah, that's
explain why you
smart.
want PTO off?
You had to use your Yeah, well, no, like I was saying, it's smart because you're just using your own paid time off rather than trying to, hey, it's, I'm not a witch, but I'm a pagan. It's hard to explain. So, okay, that was kind of a practical way to take care of that. But you answered my question. So let's go with that rather than, okay, I need to get out of this job. People should try to get out of jobs if they don't like working on holidays. Let's just make sure that no one has to work on a holiday. And of course, in the United States, that didn't turn out to be anything. You get mandated time and a half, is it, on federal holidays? So they have to pay you more, but they can still make you work unless there's something in your hiring contract that says you don't have to, whatever the situation might be from job to job. Let's jump over to stereo. Let's hear more from Auntie McItballs. Take it away, Auntie.
I worked in the limestone industry for 20 years, specifically a cement plant. We made, the powder cement, and that place was open 24/7, 365. Now we worked rotating shifts every week. We changed from days to nights, and on and on, 12-hour shifts. The entire 20 years I was out there, I worked every Christmas, every New Year, and every Thanksgiving except for one. In those 20 years, I was working, and it sucked. I missed time to spend with my family, my kids growing up. Christmas and Thanksgiving, special time of the year. Again, to give thanks and to celebrate Christ during Christmas. And I missed a lot of it. I missed a lot of my kids' activities working that shift. So it sucks. It's not good times when you're working.
So thank you for sharing your history with that, Auntie McItballs. And my question for you is the same that I posed to Shannon. It sounds like you did that for a very long time. So did you think, what was your mindset? If this is something that is more trouble than it's worth, should I try to get a different job? Should I try to advocate for myself to have these holidays off, if that's possible? Or should we go at this from a workers' rights level and say only people in hospitals, first responders, 911 operators, police officers, fire people? I say people, it's 2025. How did you tackle this? It sounds like this was just what it was for you for quite some time. But if you had thought about changing it, or if you could look back on it now, how do you look at this as an American in the context of the United States? I would say I have generally no problem with people having to work on holidays. It's part of our culture, it's part of our work ethic. And if people don't want to do that, I'm not asking for federal legislation to make that more likely, or state legislation if that was possible. I look at this as a lot of people don't have to work on Christmas. A lot of people don't have to work on Thanksgiving, if we just use those two holidays to frame this conversation. And I'm kind of just fine with the way it is. In fact, I wish more things were open 24 hours a day, just generally, like they often were before the pandemic. And I like that I can go to the grocery store on Thanksgiving or Christmas if I need to. Especially, I know you brought up a very specific example that's neither of those two things, but especially for jobs that can often be filled by young people who don't have their own family a lot of the time, who maybe are a little adventurous and don't know that they're going to regret not spending those days with their loved ones when they're young. And if this is sort of a passing of the torch that young people can kind of work on these days, and then once you have your own family or realize what a mistake that was, it can be passed to people who grow up and take your place for those jobs. I'm a left person. I'm a Democrat. I love me some Bernie Sanders, so I am all for more socialism in the United States and workers' rights. But in the specific context of what I understand to be an American worker, I think where we are makes sense. So I'm sort of separating two halves of my argument. What I think's ideal is not what we have, but for what we are, I think what we have makes sense. Let's jump back over and hear from Auntie McItballs again.
On a side note, we were compensated when we worked these holidays, basically time and a half, which was great. But if I had a choice between money or time with my family or my kids, I would always pick my kids, my family. Money can't buy happiness, and it's not going to ever get me back the time that I've lost with them. But hey, I had a family to raise. I didn't have a choice. That was my job at the time, and I couldn't quit or just say no, I'm not working. I had a family to raise, and that was my number one priority. So I was able to raise my family, pretty well working out there. But I do regret missing that time that I missed, spending time with my kids and watching them grow up.
Yeah, I really appreciate the personal share there on the Makeup Balls. Yeah, it's sad. My reaction to hearing your story is I feel for you. Um, but as you correctly pointed out, two sides of an argument, two sides of a coin. You got time and a half on those days, and that allowed you to support your family even if you couldn't spend time with them. So I know you left me another voice message, so we'll keep playing those. But yeah, once again, my question is, how do you solve this? Is it something as easy as just tell young people don't do this if you can avoid it because you're going to regret it? Is it some sort of state or federal legislation that makes it so unless something is absolutely essential for the public good, it's really hard to force people to work on holidays like Thanksgiving and Christmas? Is it advocacy for people to move out of jobs if they're in a situation where they are being told they have to work on these holidays? Once again, you may have already answered this, so we'll keep rolling through um, your um, your replies. But I would love to know what people think about this. Shannon, do you have anything to respond to from what we heard from Auntie Makeup Balls? He seems like he really regrets some of the time he had to spend away from his family. As you pointed out, when you were working, the holidays were different for you a lot of the time as a practicing pagan. But also, you said that you sometimes would work so that other people who, if you will, had more stock in some of these holidays and had a family, you don't have children, could spend time with their loved ones.
Yeah, I would usually, as long as they didn't say, well, Shanna doesn't have kids, so she should work, even if I'm senior at the job, uh, because I have kids. If they were entitled like that, then no, I would definitely take the holiday off. Um, but if they seemed really distraught, then I would say, I'll work for you. Then you can spend time with your kids and switch shifts with them. Um, because I'm petty like that. Um, but getting the extra money was more helpful to me. My family is not pagan. My family celebrates Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. They're all still Catholic. So those are big holidays for them. But I really didn't want to spend time with them anymore. So making money was better for me.
And let us not forget, thank you for bringing up the money aspect again, as we just heard from Auntie McItballs. Um, if you're willing to work on days like Thanksgiving and Christmas, you can really benefit from that financially. I don't know that that has to go away if we have state or federal legislation that would really prevent companies, unless it's absolutely essential for the public good, prevent companies from forcing people to work. But if you are willing to work because you don't have a family yet, because you're just willing to make extra money to support your family, it's quite an opportunity.
I mean,
Depending on the
dad,
situation, you can make a lot of money.
my dad was a correction officer, so he's a mandatory worker. Um, so he would always be working on the holidays when I was a kid. Um, so even like when I joined the Police Explorers at 12, I'd go on ride-alongs on Christmas or New Year's Eve, because no one was at home anyways. My dad was working. He was, you know, getting in that overtime for his retirement. So I guess I kind of picked it up from him to just work the holidays.
That's cool that you had some sort of like junior policeman program. I, I didn't hear about that when I was growing up. That seems like a lot of fun. I did know some people I went to high school with, who I'm not sure why they were chosen. It may have just been their parents had a connection, but I knew people who would go into like grocery stores and convenience stores and try to buy cigarettes and beer, but like a cop would drive them there and would park so you couldn't see them get out of the cop car. And then they'd walk in, and they seemed to be attractive from what I remember. So I guess that was the angle. And then if you sold them, they'd walk out with it, and then the cop would come in and do whatever, you know, the procedure was. That would have been fun. I believe they made money doing that too. I probably would have done it for free, but yeah, man, I should have jumped on this sort of junior police program or whatever they had going on. Let's check back in with
Secret
Auntie Make It
shoppers.
Balls on. I'm sorry, Shannon.
Oh, secret shoppers do it too. Like if you're like Ruby Tuesdays or whatever, they have like that button that says we card everyone under 40. So if you're like even just 21, 22, 23, and you're a secret shopper for one of them, because I used to do it in my 20s as a secret shopper. And if they didn't card you, then you'd have to do it that way too.
My guess,
You'd order. Go ahead.
that's not illegal. If someone's 21 and you don't card them, like that's a bad decision. But that was more of a store policy enforcement, right?
Correct. Correct. Yeah, that was because the store's hiring the secret shopper to see if they're actually carding people they should be carding, so they don't lose their liquor license if a explorer comes in and does it.
Yeah, you gotta practice for those junior police officers who roll in and ruin your day. All right, let's hear again from Auntie Bigot Balls on
I wouldn't
stereo.
change it. I wouldn't try to pass legislation to say, we people can't work during the holidays. Not at all. I live in a small town, and this industry that I was in, this specific cement plant, was, if not the highest paying, one of the highest paying jobs in this area. I grew up here. My parents were here. I didn't have any uh, intention of leaving, and I knew what I was getting into when I first started working out there. I knew that there was shift work, and you had to work or not. You didn't have to. Some people are off, others weren't. But I was a production supervisor, so I had to work, whatever shift I was assigned, and I knew that. And again, I had a family to raise, so you just take it with good with the bad. There's good things about it and bad things about it. And that was just one of the bad things that I didn't like, but I did it because I had to, and I don't regret it working. But I'll be right back.
Yeah, it's a hard situation. We heard from Auntie Miget Balls earlier that he does regret not spending more time with his family. It sounds like he missed a lot of important family time on specific holidays. It wasn't like he wasn't there other times. But as we just heard, he does not regret making that money to support his family. So it was, in between a rock and a hard place sort of situation, but he still is okay with the decision that he made. And as he pointed out, thank you for this little nugget of information. He knew what he was getting into. So that's sort of the way I frame it as well. not everybody is going to be a college professor. Not everybody is going to work for NASA. So I'm not advocating for that. But there are certainly, Shannon, you mentioned specifically retail or working at like a grocery store. No one should be surprised. I would say pre pandemic, it shifted a lot since then. So if we can go back 5 or 6 years, no one should have been surprised up until that time if they were asked/forced to work on Thanksgiving or Christmas or at 2 in the morning if they had certain types of jobs. And again, I'm not saying that's an ideal in a vacuum, but when you look at the United States as a whole, as I understand it, and as I experienced living here my entire life, that's the norm. And I don't know if I necessarily, I don't want to say feel sorry for, but I don't know if I necessarily um, can empathize with people who should have known that's what they were getting into. And it's a lot easier said than done to say, well, work really hard and get a job, because sometimes it's just not in the cards. But if we're not shy about letting people know that certain industries, especially when you're young, are going to force you to work on a holiday, I think the reality of that is somewhat to very acceptable, because you have indications of what, I mean, just growing up, I knew certain industries would expect me to work in certain conditions. Mostly just as a consumer is what I saw. I didn't have an experience like Auntie Meatballs has been telling us over on stereo. But generally, I knew that manual labor, restaurants, um, a lot of people, I don't know about now, but a lot of people used to go to restaurants for Thanksgiving. Um, that was surprising when I first realized that. So, manual labor, restaurants, retail, of course, hospitals, police officers, as we've been discussing, these are jobs that are often thankless, unfortunately, but also jobs that require certain hours. It's just the nature of the work. If I was aiming for just kind of a realistic career that I thought I need some time off, I mean, every day of my life growing up, I saw that teachers had the same holidays we did, and they had the summer off. So, I mean, there's a career right there that I think most people, especially if you look at certain areas of the country, I think most people could become a teacher in certain areas of the country if they really wanted to. I know, like in New York State, for instance, the requirements are much higher than in North Dakota. But if you're willing to move, there are plenty of industries where if your holidays are important to you, now we can talk about teacher pay, but if your holidays are important for you, there are pathways that I feel like a lot of people um, could fit in. They could take those paths. And once again, in the United States, unfortunately, we really do have to live by our choices. Or another way to phrase it, we have to live by our inability to get something better. Let's jump back over and hear more from Auntie McGetballs on stereo.
I don't regret working there. I was really good at it. I learned the whole process from beginning to end. I could run that place myself, and I did run it myself when we worked holidays or night shift. It was just a skeleton crew. We had to run the entire plant, the whole process, with me as a supervisor, and I had 4 other guys. And I was good at it. So that didn't bother me. What bothered me was just missing time with my children, my family. On another side note, and this is just personal experiences, but my dad retired from Santa Fe Railroad. He started working for them in the early 70s, and he traveled a lot, and he missed a lot of holidays as well. He worked shift work, whenever they needed him, a derailment or something, he was always called out in the middle of the night. And I guess, well, no, I know that's where I got my work ethic from, just growing up seeing him do these things for us. for his family, for his children, his wife, my mother. So it came natural to me. Yes, I didn't like it, having to be away from my family, but I had to support my family. That's just that's it. I would do whatever it would take to make sure that they had everything they needed and wanted, and that's what I did. Again, I didn't like it, but I did it because I had a family to raise.
Yeah, it all makes sense. And in the United States, you really do have to look out for yourself and your family because the government mostly is not going to help you. Democrats will help you more than Republicans. I'll offer that. But just generally, we get less social services than anywhere in the developed world. And we are the most important developed country. We're the richest, we're the most powerful. So it is really paradoxical in that way. Shannon has tweeted, but teachers/educators is not a professional degree anymore. Wow, and you have something from Newsweek. I'm going to share this over on my Twitch and Rumble streams. You can find all those links at bit.ly/NEWZ debate. This is a screen grab, so we'll just use this from Newsweek.
Yeah, I put the link in there too, just in case you want to read the whole thing. But
this is a list of degrees not classed as professional by the Trump administration: nursing, physician assistants, physical therapists, audiologists, architects. That seems strange. Accountants, also strange. Educators, seems less strange than architects and accountants, but okay. I would also guess that that would be a professional degree. And social workers. If you're a
a lot of
social
mandatory
worker who has
reporters
like a
on that.
master's degree, then I would completely disagree. I don't know. Yeah, no. I don't know exactly what it means to be a social worker. So maybe there's some wiggle room there. And it says educators rather than teachers. So I don't, if you're someone who's in the classroom, we had these people when I was growing up, maybe they could be a sub. A lot of the times they just worked in the school, but they clearly did not have the title in education as a teacher. So I guess educators leave some wiggle room, but still,
Oh,
yeah,
I
this is a
know.
little surprising.
Yeah, I know to be a social worker in Connecticut, you need a master's. You can't just have a bachelor's. If you have a bachelor's, you have to have some ridiculous amount of hours working, like 600 hours or 800 hours, some ridiculous amount of hours. Along with, if you don't have the master's degree, with a bachelor's. But if you have a master's, you can go straight into it for social work, anyways.
So this is from Newsweek. Thanks for the screen grab and also the full link. This is November 21st, 2025. So this is brand spanking new. Let me share this on Rumble and Twitch. Students doing certain degrees may no longer receive the same amount of reimbursement for their studies now that the Department of Education is implementing various measures from President Donald Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill. Oh no, it's back. One measure coming into action is that whether a degree is considered professional will influence how much reimbursement a student receives for their higher education. So I'm guessing this is like FAFSA, federal student aid type of stuff. However, there are a number of what many see as professional degrees missing from the new list, such as nursing, which sparks significant concern among nurses and nursing organizations. I would offer here, I know a lot of people who have gone into quote unquote nursing, and that can be everything from like an associate's degree or even less than that to someone who is a nurse practitioner, which is basically a small step from being a doctor. And in fact, I've seen nurse practitioners throughout my life. I believe they probably had some doctor that was their supervisor who may have had to sign off on something. Whatever the case was, I have seen nurse practitioners regularly um, in a situation where I would say I saw a doctor, but technically it was a nurse practitioner. So I bring all this up just to say that there's a lot of range when it comes to quote unquote nursing, and I wonder how that plays out here. So why all this matters from Newsweek? The costs of doing a college degree are getting higher and higher. Over the last 30 years, the average tuition for both public and private colleges has doubled after adjusting for inflation. That's according to an analysis by NPR. In just the last decade, costs of undergraduate tuition in public universities have also gone up by 30%. And some colleges are set to bring in 4% cost hikes for this upcoming academic year. This means that those in high costing degrees who may no longer receive the same amount as their degree who may no longer receive the same amount as previously because their degree has been deemed not professional, could financially struggle to cover costs, which could deter students from choosing to pursue those high demand careers. Nursing is certainly a career that's in high demand. Under the terms of Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill, the Repayment Assistance Plan, RAP, will be brought in to replace previous programs. This means that the Grad Plus program, designed to help graduate and professional students cover educational expenses, will be scrapped, while Parent Plus loans, student loans available for parents of dependent undergraduate students, will be limited. The new and simplified, quotes, new and simplified, RAP program will see annual loans for new borrowers capped at $20,500 for graduate students and $50,000 for professional students. This means that what degrees count as professional and non-professional is a really important determining factor in how much financial support students will receive. So one clarification here. From what I understand, everything that's been mentioned now has been a loan, and the new, quote, new and simplified program, RAP, is just now capping how much you can get in loans depending on what your program is labeled as. So previously, the language in the top of the story seemed to indicate to me that there was some sort of reimbursement. But now, from what I understand of these programs, this looks more like loans you get to pay for your educational expenses, and you have to pay them back. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I'm seeing here.
I know the way it
this
works
article.
here in Connecticut for the nurses, having been in a nursing home and talked to many of nurses, is that the job that they get usually pays back their student loans after so many years of working for the company. So, like, if they go to work for Hartford Hospital here, after 3 years, they get so many years taken off their loan. And that's like that with first responders or, police, stuff like that. Connecticut does pretty good at reimbursing. But if they can't get the loan in the first place, then getting reimbursed is going to be even more difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, that can make sense. So if some sort of job you get afterwards can chip away or entirely pay for your loans, and you can only take out a certain amount of loans now that your program is not considered professional, that is a clear detraction from going into that industry. Because even though you have to take out the loans in this example, those are counted as loans rather than just money you have to come up for in private loans or whatever it is, borrowing from family members, because you don't, that's not in the calculation for not refund, but for
Reimbursement.
it's not in the calculation for reimbursement benefits of the position that you may have after graduation. Yes. So in this situation, that does make sense. Thank you for bringing that up. Let's see here. What else can we grab from Newsweek? It has also been reported that engineering, a business master's, counseling or therapy, and speech pathology will not be considered quote unquote professional either. Many are now concerned about the impact this will have on students training in these professions. Yeah, imagine if this happened while you're already in the middle of your degree, with particular concern raised over how this could reduce the number of nurses across the country if less students decide to enter the profession now over financial concerns. So again, list of degrees that are now classified as not professional by the Trump administration: nursing, physician assistant, physical therapist, audiologist, architect seems really surprising to me, accountant as well. I'm not sure what it means to be an accountant, but if we're talking about master's degrees, I would call that professional. If you can do an undergrad and then is there some sort of exam you take? Okay, I could maybe see that. It says educators. So again, I'm not sure exactly what that means. And social workers. Shannon mentioned in the state of Connecticut that requires a master's degree. I would say that should definitely be professional. I don't know if that accounts here because this is at a federal level. So there's a lot of gray area.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I know different states have different things. Like I know we need a master's degree in Connecticut to become a social worker, but in I think it's Vermont, you only need a bachelor's, and you don't need all those extra hours like you do here in Connecticut. So, because I was looking to go into the profession, because I want to stay in New England, I was looking at all the different states and their requirements. But yeah, it's each state has their own requirements for what they will allow. But I definitely want my architect to have a degree, preferably a master's, when they're building my house.
Yeah, can't disagree with that. And then finally, here at the very end of the article from Newsweek, what happens next? These measures will be implemented starting July 2026. I think that's important. That likely covers a lot, if not most, of the people who are in the pipeline. Since we're talking about master's degrees, they would have to already be a student now. And so if you think a master's degree as being 2 or 1 year, 2 years or 1 year, somewhere around there, people might be out by this. But you can imagine maybe it'll affect some percentage of people that are currently enrolled, and certainly will affect people after that. Yeah, if there are jobs you can get that will chip away or completely reimburse you for your student loans, maybe rather than offering $50,000 in loans to more degrees or all master's degrees, because if something I didn't read but I was looking at is that this is supposed to be based on people's ability to pay back these loans because they're government loans, and so when you default you're not paying it back. So they're in theory using data to say, these degrees are the ones where people have problems paying it back, so we're going to offer them less money. I see value in those sorts of calculations, but maybe they can come up with another system to include in this. So if nursing doesn't let you have $50,000 in loans and only lets you have 25,000, let's just use some easy numbers. So half versus something that's considered more professional. I would say also invent another category of costs associated with a degree, so that if there are programs that will chip away at those costs or completely reimburse for those, basically erase those costs after the fact, you can say that this was the cost of the degree. And if you reach that requirement, somehow that's taken care of, while we're still not giving you the loans if your degree program is found to be one that has difficulty paying them back. So you're kind of having your cake and eating it too. It becomes more difficult because you have to have more collateral for your degree than before outside of these government loan programs. But if you can do that, and therefore the government assumes less risk for certain degrees, because obviously not every master's degree is as useful as every other master's degree. I think we can all understand that. You can still go into a job that offers this reimbursement rather than for loans, just loans. The reimbursement could also cover some sort of larger degree cost. That's just an idea to try to preserve these programs and allow people to get the full benefits of them, while still, yes, in the United States, I think it's fair to judge different master's degrees differently. And so the government, in theory, wins, and people who their master's degrees, their professions are no longer declared professional, still have some of those benefits if they choose to have a position after graduation that offers these sort of repayment / debt erasure programs. Shannon, I think your hand is up. You have something to add here?
Oh, well, with the nurses, we already have a nursing shortage in the country. So it doesn't see, especially seeing it firsthand. And it's just going to get worse if they do this. And my problem is like, I just put in, or I just put it up now that like what's still considered a professional degree, they still consider theology a professional degree, but not nurses. And that kind of blows my mind. Whether you believe in God
Yeah,
or
this
not.
is a yeah, I could be wrong. I don't know that they're judging it that way. From what I found in I could just read from Newsweek, but I was skimming because there were a bunch of experts who were interviewed. So here from USA Today, here are some examples of a professional degree that includes pharmacy, absolutely. I would say
A
dentistry, slam
doctor of
dunk.
pharmacy, though. A doctor of
A
pharmacy.
doctor of pharmacy, okay. Veterinary medicine, looks like a doctor. A chiropractic doctor. A JD or an LLB in law, that's definitely professional. An MD in medicine, slam dunk. Not all doctors, make the same amount, but that's a pretty useful degree to have. A doctorate of optometry, if I understand correctly. A doctor of osteopathic medicine, a doctor of podiatry, and a master's of divinity, or MHL, which I'm not familiar what that is, of theology. And again, if this is based on people's incomes and their ability to pay back, because we're talking about government loans, there might be some strange ones in there that are considered professional because they pay back their loans well. But all of these make sense. Theology makes the least amount of sense, but if data shows that they pay back their loans better than nurses or whatever was listed, audiologists, accountants, social workers in the degrees that are now classified as not professional by the Trump administration, I guess so be it. Let me see if I can jump back into this Newsweek article and find specifically. Yeah, here's some of the experts. A candidate for U.S. Senate in Kentucky, Amy McGrath, wrote on X, "Can someone explain how a theologian is considered more professional than a nurse practitioner?" So specifically, two of the examples that we brought up. Yes. Here's Kevin Kinzer, professor of education policy studies at Pennsylvania State University. "I don't think the point is to discern professional degrees from other degrees in terms of loan eligibility. It is to limit the exposure of the government to loans that will not be repaid, whether because of default or through public service loan forgiveness policies. So the list includes professions that generally result in high salaries and neglect professions that have lower earnings or less prominence. The exception here is theology, which may reflect more political calculations than anything else. There's also less of a sense of using loans to encourage people to enroll in other programs from a workforce development perspective. We need nurses and teachers, for example, yet loans would be unavailable to support people entering these professions." I think what he means is less loans. They would still have the ability, but it's about half, around 25,000 or so, versus 50,000 for these quote unquote professional degrees. So what's interesting here, this education policy studies professor at Pennsylvania State University specifically mentions not only defaulting on loans, but also public service loan forgiveness policies. So, contrary to what I was saying before, I guess the government would not say we need some sort of additional category of the cost of education, a cost of a degree that is larger than loans you're eligible for if it's not a quote unquote professional degree, because he's saying this is specifically targeting both people who can't pay back the loan because their master's degree generally does not give them enough income, which I think is fair, but also through public service loan forgiveness policies. So I guess when a loan is forgiven versus being paid back by your employer, those are two different things. So if your employer, after you work there for a certain amount of time, has a policy that says we'll just pay back your loans, the loans are paid back, not by you, but by your employer when you meet that criteria. If it's a public service loan forgiveness policy, the money is eaten by the government. And we can argue whether or not that's good or bad, but I understand that with a Republican in the White House, why that's something they would not be for. So again, we can debate this, but I think it does make sense in the context of Republicans don't want to spend money on education. And so they're targeting industries of people defaulting on their government loans, or even more cases of people having their loans forgiven, which means the government just loses the money entirely because of public service loan forgiveness policies. If there's a third option where a job literally will just pay for your loans out of their own pocket, that's not forgiven, but actually paid, just you're not paying it, then I see a problem here, because you're able to take out less loans if your profession is now decreed to be not professional. And therefore, if you are lucky enough to have this sort of, we'll just pay your loans rather than forgiving them, they can only forgive as much as you can borrow. And so I think that does create a problem because that's the private sector, right? I think that's the only real problem I have with this, other than this Pennsylvania State University professor of education policy did mention it is a bit weird that theology is professional, which he says may reflect more political calculations than anything else. So those are my two problems. Is if it's a private payback, they can only pay back however much you can take out. And if that's half as much as before, clearly not as beneficial as it once was. And then secondly, the fact that the theology is included, I was willing to say, well, maybe I don't know, but maybe these people are able to pay back their loans. I'm doubting that less now as we have this Penn State professor talking about how that's really an exception. Yes, Shannon, you want to throw back in?
Yeah, I'd get with chiropractic in there too. Not only theology, but chiropractic. I'd rather see a nurse practitioner than a chiropractor. I mean, that's just me personally. But yeah, I got to jump and make a phone call for a minute, so it should only take me like 5 minutes. Are you still going to be on?
Oh yeah. We've only gone an hour and a half, and I'm happy to do 2 hours for each show. Also, as the clock advances, I'm hoping that more people will be able to jump in because years ago I used to do very late shows, and my schedule changed over the years. So I'd love to keep going, but yeah, you do your thing, Shannon, and we'll
Yeah, I just
hopefully
got to
have
make
you
a
back
phone
here in
call
a
real
bit.
quick. I just wanted to tell you before I jumped off so you didn't think I was rude.
Look at those nice pagans. What's not to like? All right, on Team McHitballs, if you want to give us some more messages over on stereo, now would be the time to play them. Otherwise, we can go back into the Thanksgiving topic. We were still talking about Thanksgiving. We were talking about different professions and who's more likely to work on Thanksgiving and Christmas. And we got into this topic of professional versus non professional degrees, according to the new big, beautiful bill from the Trump administration. I would say the list of degrees now classified as not professional by the Trump administration. A lot of these people are going to be working on Thanksgiving and Christmas. Nursing, definitely, that's a possibility. Physician assistants, physical therapists, I would say less. Audiologists, less. Architects, less. Accountants, less. Educators, a lot less. Show me a school, college, whatever that's open on Thanksgiving or Christmas. I think that's very clear. Social workers, I'm guessing, are also not working on these days, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong. If somebody has some more information on that, definitely let me know. I feel like social workers being tied to the government, unless you're a police officer type of situation, military, usually those people can enjoy the holiday. So, going back to Thanksgiving, let's talk about the first Thanksgiving and why we have this tradition in the United States, even though it has changed over time. I do not pretend that we are celebrating the same day and the exact same history as actually exists. It has changed with time, and we've talked a lot about that on the show. All right. And to do that, we're going to jump over to all things important, all things factual, all things that are definitely true 100% of the time. ChatGPT. All right. The event people call the first Thanksgiving wasn't originally a national holiday, and it definitely wasn't a peaceful Disney tableau. Man, ChatGPT is getting really fancy with its writing. I wish it would just kind of be more straightforward. It was a 3-day gathering in the fall of 1621 in Plymouth, where about 50 surviving English colonists, yeah, they had it rough at first, and around 90 Wampanoag men shared food. That did happen, but there's some important context. The English were not thriving pioneers. They were half starved, disease ridden newcomers who had survived a brutal winter that killed roughly half of the settlers in Plymouth. They simply would not have made it without diplomacy from the Wampanoag, agricultural knowledge, and frankly, charity. The Wampanoag weren't showing up in a spirit of mystical harmony, they were playing high stakes regional politics. Their leader had seen his people devastated by European born epidemics that wiped out entire villages. Aligning with the English was a strategic move to balance power against rival tribes, particularly the Narragansett. The quote unquote feast itself wasn't planned. The colonists were holding a harvest celebration, and Europeans had a long tradition of such events. The Wampanoag showed up armed, standard procedure for warriors responding to noise and gunfire from the colonists' celebration, and also standard procedure for political diplomacy. It doesn't say so here, but in previous tellings of this every year, I remember that apparently here it says because it was a celebration. I've seen it attributed to the English were like just doing firing practice, practicing with their rifles. And then their Native American allies showed up because they thought, holy crap, our allies are being attacked. We're going to honor this alliance and show up and support them. And then when they showed up, they realized there was no battle. And then they're like, all right, well, let's just share some food. That's another telling of this that I've heard. So, according to this story from ChatGPT, food was then shared after the Wampanoag showed up. They heard some firing, whether or not that was actual target practice or just gunfire from the celebration from the English. They decided to share food, play games, and reinforce the alliance. Within a generation, however, relations collapsed. The same alliance that kept Plymouth afloat turned sour as English colonists expanded, took land, imposed law, and ignored agreements. By the 1670s, King Philip's War ravaged New England. It was one of the deadliest conflicts per capita in what would become the United States. The modern holiday was stitched together centuries later. It wasn't national until the Civil War, when President Lincoln, desperate to create a sense of unity, declared a national day of Thanksgiving in 1863. The sentimental Pilgrim and Indian imagery was cooked up in the late 19th and early 20th centuries by textbook writers, civic boosters, and artists. Despite all that, the 1621 event was a moment of cooperation in a time full of pressure, distrust, survival, and political maneuvering. That's the real story. Two groups navigating a tense world, briefly managing to not kill one another, sharing food, and trying to secure their futures. Now, there's more detail. I believe in 1939 and 1941, there were decisions under FDR in Congress that really cemented this is Thanksgiving across the nation, and there's no more some states celebrate at this time, some states celebrate at that time, and that's the Thanksgiving that we've been celebrating here at the end of November each year. So, when people say Thanksgiving is not real, I've heard this throughout my lifetime. That is blatantly untrue. Thanksgiving, while it's not the same day and it's not a 3-day celebration, Thanksgiving is real. Native peoples and English colonists did meet in harmony. They were allies at the time, supporting each other. It didn't last, but that's absolutely true. So, the idea of pilgrims at a table and Indians at a table sharing food is a real idea. It looked a little different at that time. They were not necessarily eating all the things we eat now, but it was a real thing. And it's morphed through time and through state and federal legislation to the federal holiday that we have today. So if that's what you want to celebrate, I am all for it. If you want to celebrate something that recognizes more of the total destruction that was brought on Native peoples in the United States, okay, that's your choice. What I don't like is when people tell others how to celebrate Thanksgiving when it is based on real history. And just like with so many things in life, unless someone is attacking you on purpose, just because someone views something differently, I don't know that you have the right to be offended. I think this extends to Columbus Day, which in many parts of the country is more thought of as Native Heritage Day, whatever they want to call it, something around those lines. Columbus Day is an unfortunate name that honors a terrible person who did accomplish something, but yet a terrible person. But its actual true reason for existing is to celebrate Italian American history, and the fact that Italian Americans in the United States were discriminated against and at times killed simply for being Italian. Maybe not the worst thing to be in the United States now or in the past. You can imagine worse identities to have when it came to public opinion. But nonetheless, it's true that there was anti-Italian sentiment in the United States, and they created a day to honor Italian Americans, and unfortunately just chose a terrible, terrible person for that day. And so, as I've said previously, if we want to change Columbus Day to another Italian person, preferably one who, existed in the time of the United States rather than the quote unquote discovery of, the Americas, I think that makes more sense, especially if that person is not a real piece of shit. But just like people who attack Thanksgiving and don't know or completely actively ignore the actual history that did exist that it's based on, people who attack Columbus Day, I think, need to look past the name of the person that it's associated with and look at the actual history of why that day exists. I don't see that a lot on the left. And I don't know that that helps us at the ballot box. Shannon, you are back with us. I think you may have completed your calls. I just went through the general history of the first Thanksgiving, which I believe you and I have discussed previously. It did take place. It was more of a 3-day festival. As we noted, the food they ate is not the same food we eat now, but it did happen. It was peaceful. It looks like it was a very good time. and it's turned into what we celebrate now over the time that took place from then until about 1941. I think it's been cemented across the country since an act by Congress, I believe, in 1941.
Yes. I would see celebrating Thanksgiving over Columbus, but that's just me. But yes, I think it should be a different Italian American if we're just going to make it an Italian American holiday. Sort of like St. Patrick's Day for the Irish.
Now, what's interesting about St. Patrick's Day and other days, trying to think of some that celebrate particular ethnic national heritage in the United States. Is St. Patrick's Day a federal holiday? I don't think it is. It's certainly not in my mind like it is about Columbus Day. I know we have parades on St. Patrick's Day, and we don't really do that for Columbus Day as much, if at all. Let me look that up.
I don't I don't think it's a federal holiday, not like Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. No, it's not a federal holiday.
Yeah, it's really interesting because, correct, it's not a federal holiday in the US, but it does seem like much more of a party day than Columbus Day. It's widely celebrated, but legally it's just another day on the federal calendar. Federal offices stay open, mail gets delivered, banks operate normally. Some cities treat it like a de facto civic holiday, like Boston, Chicago, New York, but nothing changes at the federal level. And we got a lot of Irish people in the United States who certainly, you don't have to look very hard to see true history of Irish discrimination in the United States. Once again, if I could pick who I wanted to be throughout the United States time, Irish and Italian would not be at the top, certainly wouldn't be at the bottom. Definitely groups that had it worse than them, but they also had discrimination as well. This gets into the broader point, though. It's like, if we have a federal holiday celebrating Italian heritage, but Irish heritage is not a federal holiday, whereas our, federal or just cultural holiday to celebrate this heritage or that heritage, it gets complicated. Of course, the answer is, well, it just kind of happened this way. And it would be really hard to try to give everybody one because we don't really like holidays in the United States.
Very true.
So, Shannon, maybe as we wrap up here, you mentioned you're a pagan. How does that affect or not affect your views on Thanksgiving?
It doesn't go one way or the other with Thanksgiving. As I said, I enjoy making the whole meal, the whole turkey, mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, stuffing, corn, carrots, cranberry sauce, cranberry chutney, pumpkin pie. I love making that stuff. But it's just another day. I mean, I can make that stuff anytime, but they're cheaper now.
Yeah, you certainly see more pumpkin pies in the stores around this time of year. I bet they sell cranberry sauce year round, but yeah, more of it now. They're certainly selling it more, so you'd feel like it'd be around more. Um, yeah, I wonder. I've never looked for a turkey like in March or May, but yeah, they definitely have the frozen turkey section. They always have mashed potatoes and gravy, of course. They always have green beans. What else are we thinking? What Ask ChatGPT, the official authority on everything. Eggnog's a Christmas thing that I wish they sold year round. I love eggnog. So the usual suspects, according to ChatGPT: turkey. Its role is more ceremonial than flavor. A lot of cooks secretly prefer the side dishes. Yeah, I always have the turkey, but it's never something I crave. I usually drown it in gravy. So yeah, turkey is the main, dish, if you will, but the other things are what I really go for. I would be perfectly happy if I did a Thanksgiving that didn't have turkey and we just had everything else. I would want gravy, and I'd want that gravy to be turkey based. But the turkey itself, I think most people are probably on the side of chicken tastes better. Mashed potatoes, of course, soft, buttery, lots of gravy, stuffing, or dressing, depending on where you grew up. Wow, I've never heard of that. Bread turned into an herbal sponge. That's great. Cranberry sauce. God, I love the cranberry sauce. And then the sweeter side of the feast, pumpkin pie. Yeah, okay, apple pie. Pumpkin pie is what I think, but sure, apple pie. And yes, pecan pie. Pecan pie is great, but I only want to have it at certain times. I don't need pecan pie any other time than a holiday or two each year. I will eat apple pie any day of the week, and I would probably eat pumpkin pie any day of the week as well. I think pumpkin pie is one that should, and I think it is sold around the year, but pumpkin pie is definitely a pie that people should buy more of. And then here's some more specific geographic based Thanksgiving foods. Southerners are more into mac and cheese. I'm not sure I've ever had mac and cheese at Thanksgiving, but I love mac and cheese. That's fine. Collard greens. Not a huge fan of that, but all right, that's okay. Cornbread dressing. Love cornbread. So cornbread's another thing, just like pumpkin pie, that we should eat more often. Sweet potato casserole topped with marshmallows. Yep, like sweet potatoes. I'm okay with just having that once or twice a year with or without marshmallows, but that is always welcome at the big meals. New Englanders use squash, oyster stuffing. Midwestern tables get heavy with casseroles. Southwestern dishes include tamales, chiles. Indigenous cooks often bring back foods that predate the holiday, like corn. I've never had corn on the cob for Thanksgiving, but certainly corn in like a bowl. That's fine. Beans, squash, wild rice, game meats. I'd rather have some game meats than the turkey. That sounds great, especially since it's only, once a year. All right. So we might start wrapping things up here on News Debate. We are live on Twitter Spaces and Stereo, Twitch, and Rumble. I think I'll do some more shows after Thanksgiving. So like I said, I wanted this to be our Thanksgiving show. Big thanks to everybody who was a part of today's program. Join my Discord server and follow me on Twitter for updates about when I will be live in the future. All those links at bit.ly/NEWZ debates. Have a great Thanksgiving holiday, whatever you end up doing. Just enjoy the time off that many, many people, not everybody, but many people in the U.S. enjoy around this time of year. And avoid politics. Just enjoy the food. Watch some football. Haven't talked about the football aspect of all this. And yeah, have a good holiday. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.